We're thrilled to be back with you. I think many of us on this stage have been here many times, and it's always a pleasure and privilege. I wanted to kind of start with a little story, which is Missy, Royce, and myself, in terms of Opera Philadelphia, go way back. Missy was a composer in residence at Opera Philadelphia some time ago. We did days, years, whatever. And then we went on and commissioned Royce and Missy's Breaking the Waves. And if you haven't seen it, do everything you can to try to find another performance and production of it. It's been many places all over the world. It's incredible and extraordinary. And we're back all together again with the listeners. And one of my, many people are like, well, when did you guys start talking about the listeners? When did this begin? And so we premiered Breaking the Waves in 2016. And after one of the performances, I went up to my office. And at the time, our president and general director at the time, David Devan, runs up. I can hear him coming around the corner of my office. And he comes around, he's out of breath, he's like labored, he's like, which is not like him. I mean, he gets energetic, but he's not like in distress. And so he's very excited, and he kind of like comes in, he's just like, I can't get over how incredible this is, the way the audience is responding, the connection that everyone seems to be having, the conversations that are happening afterwards, what we're all learning, what we've learned from each other, what we're doing together. I can't believe this. Then he goes, should we talk to them about another commission now? Typically, we wouldn't do it during the performances while it's happening, right? So my response to that was, I was like, well, funny enough, I had just had coffee with Missy the day prior. I don't know if you remember this. And Missy was like, you know, I'm really wanting to write a larger scale opera. And so I was like, why don't we talk to them about writing a larger scale opera? That's what they want to do. Let's talk about it. And that's where listeners began, way back when we were even kind of in production with Breaking the Waves. So it's been a long time. We've worked together all very closely. This is an amazing group of people. And I think what might be a really great starting point would be, while I'm talking about like the gestation of kind of our relationship together, the two of you have had a relationship that predates that, have had works done prior to that. And I wondered if you want to talk about a little bit about how you met, how your work started together, because you have become incredible team of collaborators that are changing the industry massively. And I think it'd be really interesting to know where that began.
You tell the story better than I do of how we met.
So I was doing a concert, I think it was a young composers concert at Carnegie Hall in 2009. And Missy came in support of some of her colleagues, and she handed me a postcard for her opera Song from the Uproar. And she said, you should come see this. There's a presentation of about 35, 40 minutes at Galapagos Art Space, this really cool space that I'm sure some of you remember in downtown Brooklyn. That I don't think it exists, or it's been repurposed as something. And so I went to see this presentation, and then a couple weeks later, Missy and I went and had lunch, and she asked me if I would help her complete the opera. And so I was very, very, very lucky to come on board your very first opera, and it's been this crazy journey ever since.
Yeah.
So Carnegie Hall, you just have to hang out in the lobby of Carnegie Hall, and you'll find amazing composers.
I think before we get to maybe our first selection, which I think would be really wonderful, prior to that, just setting up a little bit, could you tell us what Listeners is about? And maybe after the selection, we can start working backwards and talking about why it is this story. So what is Listeners about?
Sure. So The Listeners is a story that was actually written by our friend Jordan Tannehill, the amazing Canadian writer, playwright, now TV writer, novelist. And when we got the commission from Opera Philadelphia, we went to Jordan and said, we really want you to help us create a really compelling story for an opera. And the challenge we gave him was, what story would you write if you knew it was going to be an opera first? And so he's like, oh, let me think about it. And he came back with like 4 different stories, each about 3 paragraphs, and one of them was the listeners. So we took this 3-paragraph treatment, and then he expanded it into like a 7-page treatment, and then that became the genesis, that became the basis of the libretto. And the crazy thing is that he then took that story and turned it into during the pandemic, the opera was delayed, all live performances was delayed, but Jordan went and turned it into a novel, and now it has been turned into a TV show, which just premiered last week at the Toronto Film Festival. So starring Rebecca Hall in the main role. So this little, zygote of an idea has gone all these different places, but it's kind of like starting from the same ancestor of this 3 paragraphs. So The Listeners is a story that's set in present-day America in a southwestern U.S. suburb. I always picture like a suburb of Vegas. And it centers on a woman named Claire Devon, who is plagued by a mysterious sound. It's this mysterious hum that won't leave her alone. And it's really messing with her life. She loses her job. It's interfering with her marriage. And then when she's kind of at her lowest point, she finds a community support group for other people in the community who hear the hum, hear the noise. And it's run by a very charismatic older man named Howard Bard. And Claire hears about this through one of her students who also hears the hum. And so they go to this meeting, and it seems like this is the answer, but fast forward to Act 2, and the community group takes on cult-like dimensions, and Howard's, the rituals he's putting them through become increasingly strange, and he becomes increasingly manipulative. And then there's a twist at the end, which I'm not going to tell you about. You have to come see it.
So the selections that we have for you this evening are kind of like working their way through chronological order within the opera. So I wonder if the first one we have is Claire's aria, featuring Jazmine Saunders, and I wonder if we wanted to set that up a little bit.
Yeah, so imagine a suburban house, and this woman comes sort of crawling out in the middle of the night, and she is plagued by this sonic conundrum. And so I think that's pretty much all you need to know.
Oh, and she's singing to a coyote.
Oh, yeah.
I need to know that.
There's a dancer coyote.
Anxiety full
listening to that, and you touched on this earlier, and I think it's been so long now that I kind of forgot that while you were working on this piece, the pandemic kind of happened somewhat, at least in my perspective, like in the middle, and feel free to correct that. We had...
End-ish.
In the end-ish? Yeah. I guess I'm thinking about it like we had the first workshop that Lileana was there for. We somehow got everyone in the room. It was incredible. I don't think Afton was able to be there yet. But so I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you dealt with the process of kind of being like mid-creation or like late-stage creation of an opera that then kind of things stopped, and you guys did kind of a pretty incredible thing of how you continued working together. And Lileana, I don't know how you all kept that going at that time, but I'm kind of curious.
We were very lucky. It bought us a little bit of time. And we were so lucky, we were just reflecting on this. During the first 3 months of COVID, we escaped to our dear friend Mimi Watkins' house. And so we had 3 months of collaborative time where it was really intense and rigorous and awesome. But yeah, so it was a really fruitful thing. And like, of all the devastating things that COVID wrought, it did allow for us to sort of dot our I's and cross our T's on this project. So yeah, it was, there was a tiny little kernel of a blessing there.
And Lileana, were you able to be in touch with the team at that time? Like, how did your involvement work while they were kind of like hibernating or working?
Yes, in the advent of Zoom, we spend a lot of time talking over Zoom, talking about character, talking about development. But first of all, hey, we just listened to this woman howl. Let's give her another round of applause. Yes, that was cute. Okay, girl, yes. So part of the. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing out there? Yes, everybody awake? Everybody good? Okay, it's dark. We can't see your faces, but I like to check in. Yeah, we talked. We spent a lot of time just trying to figure out like what's at the core. Like, how do we follow everybody's journey? And like I asked a bunch of questions, and you all kind of dug into what was at the core of Claire's journey and all of the characters really as they move through. And that's what's so exciting about working with them, is that they care about character and care about people and psychology. And so like part of that for me as a director, and particularly as a theater director, like I like to explore that with everybody. So that was what we did.
Opera is theater.
Yes, it is.
You touched on this earlier, but that this was designed to be an opera first and foremost, which is unique. Oftentimes opera takes adaptations, right? How did that work with connecting with Jordan Tannehill, and how did you present him you came to him with a lot of ideas. How did those initial conversations go, and why, and how?
Yeah, I mean, we went to Jordan with a sort of list of things that we were thinking about, things that were floating around in the zeitgeist, things that everyone in America was talking about. So it was, this is right before the 2016 election, and we started this process. And so we were talking about the power of charismatic leaders and the collective need for Americans, especially in the wake of the election, to like find a community, and the dwindling ways of doing that in modern society, and this sort of epidemic of loneliness. That there's an article in the Times like every other day about, are we experiencing a loneliness epidemic? And so all of these things were sort of floating around. And I'm also very interested in creating stories with complicated women at the center, often women who find themselves in impossible, extreme situations and have to do something radically unexpected to get themselves out of it or to solve the problem. So Jordan kind of went away and let all that percolate. Yeah.
And did you have multiple touch points together? Because you're coming to him with very kind of specific things. Like you in particular, you talked about cults, that you wanted like cults to be like a big part of this, right? How does that conversation go?
Yeah, that was the other thing I didn't mention, was that there were all these cult documentaries at the time, and still are. So Wild Wild Country, The Vow about Nixium, Holy Hell, which is this amazing movie about a cult in California called the Buddha Field, Going Clear, talking about Scientology. So all of that sort of fed into it. And I just thought it'd be amazing to turn an opera chorus into a cult and basically like let Lileana lead it. And it was like, we're gonna do this. Yeah.
And so it's a larger symptom of what's happening in America. is
Yeah,
what you're
I think
experiencing.
the cults are a symptom. We have a lot of cults in America more than in any other country, and I think that is a result of these things I was mentioning: this epidemic of loneliness, the sort of need for community, the need for connection.
Great. Why don't we jump to our next selection, just so we get everybody in. So this is Kyle's aria. Do you want to? Which one wants to set that one up?
Sure. So you guys get to meet Kyle, our high school student, and this is a moment in the classroom where Claire notices that one of her students is struggling and holds him back, and then he reveals that he's hearing a hum, and she confides that she also hears it too. And so this is their first communion over hearing this strange sound that really is causing a lot of mayhem in their lives.
It's everything. My dad gets transferred every year. We pack up, ship off, move in another house that looks the same. I don't make friends. It's not easy for me. I try to read, but the letters get all messed up. My mom is sad, like deep depression sad. What else do you want to know? And on
this is a partnership piece, meaning that Opera Philadelphia, Norwegian National Opera, and Lyric Opera Chicago are all commissioners. Not too bad, you know. It's great company if you can get it, right? And I wondered, Afton, if you wanted to talk a little bit about it. Will, after it premieres at Opera Philadelphia, it will go to Chicago down the line. And I wondered what the conversations at Lyric have been about the excitement around this piece. What's interesting for you all to kind of convey in Chicago?
Yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful to be up here with such an amazing and dynamic group of creatives. Lyric Opera of Chicago and the City of Chicago are excited to have the listeners in-house with us. And I have the wonderful opportunity and responsibility as Vice President of Lyric Unlimited, which is our learning and civic engagement, to think about these ways in which we are going to bring the listeners to life, but also to the city of Chicago. Not only those individuals who will buy tickets to come to see the opera, but those folks who may not know yet what it's about, or they may not know yet if they like opera. And so how we are using this amazing piece that has so many relevant and modern day, obviously, themes and behaviors, human behaviors, in which we see and we come in contact with daily. And some of us might even have some of those behaviors. And so we have a group of folks who are working on ancillary activities and conversations, and look forward to having Missy and Royce as part of those conversations. I'm trying to twist Lileana's arm to come down and join us. But it's really interesting. So one of the programs that we have within Lyric Unlimited is called Music That Heals. And this is a program in which we are using sound familiar? We are using sound and music to provide a meditative state and to provide meditative healing for anyone, for folks who come in contact with that. And so we're doing that around some other pieces that we have this season, specifically Fidelio and Blue. But I also challenged a group that we're working with to come up with a concept for music that heals around the listeners. Because as Claire and Kyle, have both exhibited in their pieces, they are looking for a way to heal themselves from this sound that they cannot get away from, and find community in that. And so those two things go together simultaneously in any way that you find them. And so having these types of activities to bring the community into the Opera House well before the opera arrives in March, to give folks an opportunity, to even just be in our space. By show of hands, and I'm not a teacher, who's been to Lyric Opera of Chicago? Okay, I see some hands, all right. It's a beautiful, beautiful space. It takes up a lot of real estate in Chicago, but it also can be off-putting. It may feel inaccessible for many, both by just transportation of getting there and also feeling welcoming to even be in that space. So my team's responsibility is to eliminate those barriers to access, whether it's by tickets or by breaking down our productions to a level, or not a level, but in a way that is digestible for folks to get their first taste of what opera is. So we're working on those types of programming, and also I think it's really important that we have the dialogue and the conversation that this piece is, while it has cult-like behavior in it, it is not about a cult. It is about folks who are literally dying to belong or to find some type of connection. And I think we all have that within us, whatever it is. If you have young people in your life, or you might be a teacher, this scene that we just saw is relevant in so many ways when you have students who are disconnecting from the classroom, and how you work to bring them in and find what it is that is causing that disconnection. And it might be something that you too are struggling with. And so I think that it is so realistic in that way, and it really speaks to so many people. So when we break down, you got to come down to the Loop at 20 North Wacker, to see this show. And we really get to the meat and potatoes of what this is about. It really speaks to more of us than we think that it does. And so that's what I'm really looking forward to bringing to the city of Chicago, our community, and our patrons.
Yes. Afton, Afton leads me to think about the characters you have all created, and I think before I go to kind of how design and production works within what Missy and Royce have created specifically, I'm curious to then delve into kind of and picking up what Afton kind of touched on, which are these characters that many of us, sitting in rehearsals even yesterday, so yesterday we had the final room run, which if you don't want to know what that is, you're in the rehearsal hall and you run the show top to bottom, and it was fantastic. And I went through various phases of connecting with various moments and various characters and seeing myself with them at various stages of life. Like it's, you know what I mean? It's kind of visceral, but it's also very, I don't know, it lives in us, and it's a story that I think obviously touches on the world that we're living into. Anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying, I'd love to talk about the characters and how you chose to develop the characters that you did, create them within the piece that they are. And you in particular said something to me that I made a point of noting, which is the idea of suppressed potential, which I think so yesterday when I was watching it, it was ringing in my head when you were talking about that. So I wonder if you just wanted to talk about the characters and who they are and how you kind of chose to represent a lot of this in them.
Yeah, well, we were very lucky again to have Jordan's template, which was this treatment. And we wanted to tell a story that was very contemporary. And so the language involves a really present-day vernacular. And right after this scene, actually, that you just heard, is a little sort of mini scene between two high school girls where they smoke dope outside the school, and they talk about one of their mothers having a sexual relationship with her uncle, and that and the other one says that, I thank God my mom doesn't do that. She just reads romance novels or watches TV and humps the couch. And so it's that kind of really fun vernacular that is it's normal, and we see it on TV and in the movies all the time, but we never see it in the opera. Opera is so rarely fun anymore. And so I think that I hope to God when you all come to see it, because I know you all have tickets, that you will just have a great time. And that it's a meaningful story. It really does. It's thoughtful. We've spent a lot of time making this into something that is really meaningful, but it's also really fun. I sit in the room and I'm just like, I'm having fun. And I've seen this 85 times. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to share it with you all, and I hope that you all come with open hearts and with an ability or a desire to have a lot of fun with us.
I could just say a little bit about this idea of female potential, which was one of the themes that emerged, not really in Jordan's treatment, but as we were writing it, we often discover what the work is about, as we're in the middle of it. And I was thinking about my family and the women in my family, and my mom in particular. My sister and I are the first women in our family. We're the first generation to be able to decide what we wanted to do when we grew up. And my mom and her sisters she was given the option of being a nurse or a teacher, and she's like, well, I hate blood, so I guess I'm a teacher. But her destiny, she always wanted to be an architect. And so I've been thinking a lot my whole life about what happens to that potential for scheming and building and thinking strategically when it's not allowed to be realized, when society does not provide an outlet for that. So the character of Claire, just sung in Philadelphia by the amazing Nicole Heaston, and here by Jazmine Saunders, is really based on that idea. And potential will emerge, sometimes will emerge in crazy, crazy ways if it is suppressed. It's gonna come out in some way, but in Claire's case, it's a very controversial way.
I'll say in relationship to cults, right? When we were doing all of this research, part of the reason why I think they were so popular is because you're like, how? How did this happen? How did you find yourself in this? And I think the kind of addictive, binge-worthy quality of it is because you realize, oh, I might be subject to that too. Like, I might find myself in this kind of lonely place looking for meaning, and I find it here, right? Like, we read this book called Cultish, where it's just like a yoga class can be a cult, right? Because you're finding meaning, you're finding connection, you're finding community inside of that. And so part of like the journey is kind of like, why is everybody here? Everybody's here because they're experiencing this hum, they're experiencing this kind of repressed potential. They have to kind of encounter something inside of their lives, and that's kind of what we get to explore in Claire in particular, Kyle with his own family life and struggle, which you just saw in the scene in the classroom. And then there's the mysterious Howard Bard, right? Like, who is like the cult leader. In some ways you're trying to figure out, like, who are they? What do they want? Why are they manipulating people in this way? What makes a charismatic leader decide to manipulate folks? And then you realize that, like, part of the interesting things about it is that it doesn't start off being like, ha ha ha, welcome to my cult, we're gonna do awful things. No, it starts off with this sense of hope, this sense of potential, this sense of like, if we all gather together and make this beautiful music, your pain will go away, you know? And that's what I think makes it complicated, because we're not binary. We contain both light and we also contain the potential for harm. We as human beings are complex, and I think that's what's so exciting about living inside of this universe, inside of the listeners, is like we get to examine all of the ways in which one single shift in our journey could lead us in a different direction.
If I just might add on to that, you know, the idea of suppressed potential, we see that come to fruition, and we see that in so many ways and in so many things. And just thinking about how Claire gets to the brink of, like, she is at the end of it, and how that materializes in the most kind of catastrophic way. And you see this happen on stage. And when I think about it, and you know, I've seen that, and I'm like, how does that show up in everyone else and in everyday folks who are not, you know, fictional characters? But how does that show up for us when we feel like we could have been an architect, but we're forced to be a teacher? Or we feel like we could have been the president, but we're forced to not be. You know, like all of those things. And how does that show up and manifest itself? And then it feels like it then just trickles down to this sense of belonging. I remember exactly where I was after the 2016 election, and I was in Puerto Rico and got on a boat and wanted to feel some sense of connection with people, but I was on a boat, and that didn't work. And so, but I was, you know, wanting to feel like community. And so it manifests itself in so many ways. And I feel like if we can, by looking at this piece and examining that, and I always think, what are the takeaways? What do we want people to walk away out of the Opera House thinking? Yes, like this piece, like, have fun with it. It is an amazing, fun piece that is not traditional opera, whatever that means for people. But like, when you walk away with it, what are the questions that you're asking yourself when you walk out of the theater? And what I always challenge people to think and to come into the theater with are 3 questions that they hope to answer. And if they don't get the answer, then having those conversations afterwards. So that's why I think it's important to have these spaces for post-performance talkbacks and panel discussions like this and others, so that people can ask those questions once they've engaged with the piece and identify, like, how this is manifesting for them, how they might see themselves on stage. And that's something that, like, we don't always get to see when maybe you do see yourself on stage as the Countess, I don't know. But, you know, I mean, in this show, I think specifically, there are so many characters that we see and that we, I think, come in contact with. And so it's just like that suppression of the hope that they all have and how it manifests itself specifically in this show, and then for all of us as we show up as humans.
Yeah, but I also, in addition to that, right, I love to come in not knowing what I'm going to see. I'm like, woohoo, woohoo, here I am, going on a ride, right? And then unexpectedly finding a connection to a character that I wouldn't have thought of as myself, right? Like, oh, am I like that person? You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean? Because I think in some ways, like the beauty of this piece is that we find ourselves in everybody unexpectedly, and that can be a joy too, right? To think, oh, I should be relating to the high school student because I'm only 17. But no, I'm relating to the cult leader? What? Terrifying. Why? You know, like I think the journey, like the questioning is something that's so satisfying about seeing, you know, this work or participating in this work. And what I'm so excited about what you're doing, which is inviting people to think that maybe this isn't part of me, maybe this can't be part of me, and then realizing, oh, whoa, I'm in relationship to this. Oh, this is asking a question that I feel like, what would I do if I felt really alone in this small town where nobody understood me and thought that I was crazy? Where would I go? You know, it's exciting.
So then how does the design and the production and the staging work in relationship with what Missy and Royce have created?
Yeah, so that's my favorite part. Hey guys, I want to get up and bother you all. It's rather quiet over there. Just want to climb under the seat. No, basically, I feel like one of the most important things about asking people to sit down for a couple of hours and turn off their cell phones is to make it exciting for them. Yes? Yes? No? Yes? Hey guys. Hey. Yeah. Yeah, turn on the lights. Excuse me.
They're giving you house
Oh
lights.
my God. Yeah, so basically, nobody's gonna do this in the opera, but essentially, you wanna like defy expectation, right? Like you wanna feel excited, you wanna feel a little bit nervous, you wanna feel a little bit like your heart is palpitating a little bit, which Missy has done in her music. You heard that theme, boom, 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 boom. I go around singing it all day. But basically, I think the production essentially tries to keep a lack of safety in the world, right? Like the world is kind of shifting underneath people. Like they feel like they're on stable ground, and then all of a sudden they're like spinning. And I feel like that's terrifying, right? Like the sense that you think you're on solid ground, and then the world starts shifting. So Adam Rigg, who is the set designer, created this really amazing universe. So also, I'm out of breath from walking around and harassing you guys. But essentially, I feel like there's gotta be a sense of vastness, right? Like you've created a world that is vast, that is complex, and also intimate. And so that's what I think the set design tries to do. It tries to give us that sense of expansion of the desert where the coyote lives, and also the kind of boxed in quality of, you think about these cookie cutter houses in suburbia that all look the same, and where Claire lives inside of that, both really close to this vastness and yet really contained in her living environment. And that's what I think the set and the production tries to do. It tries to contain both while also keeping it moving and shifting in mysterious ways.
All right, let's all breathe, and we'll have a breathe break here, and then we'll hear your singers. So why don't we? Our third selection for you is a trio featuring Howard, Claire, and Angela. Do we want to set that up for our audience?
Sure, we can do it together.
In tandem.
So this is, Claire and Kyle come to the meeting for the first time, and after they sort of get acclimatized to the group, Howard decides that they're going to try to recruit people, that the answer is in recruitment, building a big army of people that can try to harness the hum or figure out the hum. And so this is a weird social media post that they're making. It may be Facebook Live, maybe Instagram Live, maybe TikTok, maybe something else, but they are filming themselves, and it's going out in a live stream where they're appealing to people who have heard this hum to come and join their family.
from an intense, consuming phenomenon. Heard by sensitive ears only. I offer a place of solace here in my home. We come together to understand this plague of sound.
We're a family. We'd like to fold you into our fold. When you've exhausted every possible solution, to family, we all need a family that understands us. This could be that family.
Join us Mondays and Thursdays, 103 Colcom Road. Share your personal pain. We could be that family. We could be that family. We could be that family.
Well, speaking of social media, an excerpt of the listeners kind of went TikTok viral. It was like, what, 2.5 million views, if we call that?
Well, and it was the moment that I
yeah.
was talking about before.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it's really, why do we think it went viral? Does opera often go viral on social media? And what's exciting about this particular excerpt that went viral?
Well, it was a little salty. There were two moments that actually went viral. One was the two teenagers and the daughter, Ashley, who we don't see today, who are smoking dope outside the school. But then there was another moment when Claire, in her classroom, she sort of loses it, and she tells her class to F off. And that went viral in a really, really exciting way. And I think that people were just like, especially kids on TikTok, were just like, oh my God, opera can use those words? Opera can, like, it can look like these experiences that I actually have. And so it was really cool to read the comments because these kids were like, well, if this is what opera is, I'd go every week. I'll bring my opera glasses. And it was just like, oh my goodness, these kids are actually having their first engagement with opera, and it's in a 20-second clip. It was a totally digestible morsel, and they just started sharing it and sharing it and sharing it. I think we had 1,000 comments, I believe, and 2.5 million views for the smoking scene, and then 1 million views for Claire's freak out. So it was just really exciting to see this demographic of people that don't go to the opera and who had no idea that opera could be inviting to them. And really making it feel like a place that they were welcomed in, and a space that felt like it resonated with them personally. So, yeah.
So opera can be a storytelling tool for the new millennium, for sure. And what can opera do in that way that other mediums don't or can't?
So, I mean, what I love about opera, the reason I'm drawn to making so many operas is the layering, the psychological complexity. So even in a little excerpt like this with just piano, you have so many layers. There's the music, there's the words, there's the staging, there's the orchestration, and they can all be sort of communicating different things. So you're able to create these really deep, complex, real experiences. Like when we have an experience, it's often many different emotions at once, and what we're thinking often doesn't match what we're saying. So I love being able to illuminate that. I came to opera, like when I was in my late 20s. And I did not grow up in a musical household, grew up in Pennsylvania, did not grow up going to the opera, but I watched a lot of MTV. And so I came to opera through music video. I wanted an immersive art form, and music video kind of is that, like especially these epic, like Guns N' Roses videos from the 80s and 90s. And so I was like, this is the ultimate art. And then later on I was like, oh, it's kind of like opera. And I think with all this, you know, this fashion for like immersive art form. Everyone wants to be immersed in these art forms and have experiential art forms like Sleep No More or whatever the new one is.
Life and Trust.
Life and Trust, yeah. And I'm like, that's opera. Was opera 400 years ago. And so I think for me, it's like I see a direct connection to that. And so it doesn't surprise me that young people would connect with opera in that way, especially if you can bring their experiences to life.
I'm gonna go to our kind of next excerpt, which is like kind of cuts. We're bringing kind of two excerpts together for you, or selections, I should say, excuse me. The first is Angela's Confessional, and then the second is Howard's aria. Do you want to kind of contextualize those worlds?
Sure. So Angela is essentially, like she sings about it in her first aria, she is the number 2 to Howard. So she is the second in command, sort of, in this cult. And one of the conceits that this opera uses is we have these confessionals. So there's these filmed moments, sort of in line with what Scientologists did, where they collected all the secrets and sort of had these archives of people telling their personal secrets. And so Howard extracts these personal confessions, we call them. And this is the top of Act 2, where Angela is, I think it's her second confessional, but we don't only see this one, but so it's not her first attempt at opening up to him, I don't believe. But it's early on in her relationship with Howard. And she's talking about why she has come to be involved in this group, or in the cult. What's really cool about this first excerpt is that when we got to Norway, it wasn't written yet. And not because there was an incomplete score that we were submitting, but because the Mezzo-Soprano came to us during one of the rehearsals and said, I'd like to talk through the dramatic journey of my character. I'm having a hard time understanding how I get from Act 1 to Act 2, because she has a pretty massive journey. And it wasn't so much trying to convey to her what she was misunderstanding. It was like, oh, I think that we've missed a sort of a link in your story. And so Missy and I went away, and in about a week, thank God for your publisher, who put everything together so that Shermer. They got all the orchestral parts like all squared away within like a week, which is outrageous. So great. And so this is a moment that really means a lot to us, because it felt organic. It felt like we had to write it. It was in the room. I remember bringing text first to a circle, and we read the text, and we were like, okay, this is right. Then Missy ran away, because we wanted to make sure that, since it had to be done very quickly, that everything was, all of our I's were dotted and T's were crossed again. And so it occupies a very exciting and important place in my heart. And then it segues into sort of the legitimate top of Act 2, where we call this the entr'acte. And then this top of Act 2 is where Howard is leading the group in a ritual around this hum. And it's called I've Built This For You.
Can a human combust? anymore. I can't stand that name. People disappear all the time. I expect it. Friends, boyfriends, casual colleagues, they call me names. Exasperating, loud, overbearing, annoying, unreliable. But I am as loyal as they come. But loyalty breaks my heart again and again. My heart is crossed. People disappear all the time. I expect it. They put me down, annihilate me, then they dissolve into the world. They abandon me. Leave me with nothing but noise. That's why I've come. That's why I've come.
I see your shame. A morass of muck and mud. I lift you, hoist you from the quagmire. I summon your potential, repress it in the pit, lodge in your core. Massage up and out, through confession, reflection, your true self awakens. I set you free. I built this for you. I alone can harness the heart. Find your harmony.
You guys are watching a bunch of cliffhangers. You're kind of like, because it keeps going. I'm so excited for you all to see it.
It's intentional.
I also realized that this is the American premiere of all of this music. This is the first time any of this
Here
has
at
been
the
done in
Guggenheim.
America. So yes, yeah.
He in particular, like this character, and this moment too. I'm curious to just, for those of us that aren't creative artists and aren't composers and writers, and what is that for you to delve into a character like that? What is that? Does it take emotional entanglement into that? Do you have to go into kind of this like very difficult space and to access it? Because I know different people have creative outlets and they navigate that in different ways. And I'm curious maybe for you, what that looks like for any of you really.
Yeah. I think it used to be like that for me. Like when I'm just gonna confess to you all now. When I wrote Breaking the Waves, it was a really hard emotional journey. It's a very dark story, a very dark piece. And as Royce knows, I went to some really dark places while writing it. And I think I've learned to to separate that a little more, which is emotionally healthy. But I also, like I see, there's a whole journey in all of these characters. Like Howard is not like bad from the beginning. Like you saw a little bit of him when he's trying to recruit people. He's much more inviting before the language gets super weird in Act 2. So I find it really interesting. I focus on like how the characters change, because they're only interesting if they're changing throughout, really.
Do you think that's maybe something that our newer audiences are like learning and gaining greater interest in opera for? Sometimes, in some of like what we call, let's say, the standard repertoire, you don't feel that journey, especially you don't see it in women. We don't see necessarily journeys from characters. Sometimes they can be, you can make a case for them being one-dimensional. And I know everyone on this stage is working very hard at changing that. So I bet that's also, there's part of like, it's probably therapeutic in there that you're connecting with someone in your own piece that is a human being going on a journey like the rest of us, even if they may go a little darker than some. I wanted to kind of talk briefly about, because I know we need to wrap up. We could just keep doing this for hours. But I'm kind of curious about talking about, we've talked about a lot about like the new millennial audience and creating, in various different ways, breaking barriers. And so, as many of you know, and I think Caroline announced this earlier, that like we have a new general director and president in Anthony Roth-Costanzo, also brilliant, wonderful countertenor. You couldn't be here with us, but he's only, I think, been leading Opera Philadelphia maybe, 4 months, right? And as you can imagine, we're doing a lot. And one of the big things that he and our company has done very recently is created kind of a revolutionary ticket item called Pick Your Price, which means that you can pick any show from our season, any seat in the theater, and everything. It's all $11. And already in about, I think it was, I want to make sure I have the numbers right. Already in about 2 weeks, we've sold 9,000 tickets. All performances in the entire season through May are 90% sold. We're now it's causing us to release limited view tickets, which we've never really done before. 68% of those ticket buyers are brand new to us. So when we talk about barriers and access to opera, this is one of those. We remove the economic barrier, right? We're figuring it out. We're still learning. But when you have conversations in spaces when people say the public isn't interested in opera, or newer audiences and sometimes it becomes aged. Younger audiences aren't interested in opera. I'm curious, like, what maybe removing this barrier means to you as in creative artists that are working in this field and working in the arts and creating a different type of, for lack of a better word, access and conversation.
Yeah, I just feel like you can get your friends to come out a little bit easier, and that makes a big difference. You know, that there's that in some ways I think part of, just to acknowledge it, right? The ticket price of, I would, you know, when I was a young artist starting out in New York and I was curious, and then I'd see a $250 bill and I'd be like, well, one day I'll make it to the opera, you know? So in some ways, like I think about a high school student, you know, they'll spend more going to a movie. So now you get to actually just go and pick your price, which I think is so powerful, to just be like, let's try something new. In some ways, like, it's not just about like access into the theater, it's also the ability to risk a little bit more, to risk your time because you can go and see something new and try it because it's not gonna break your bank. Yeah.
I also think, like, I'll be the first one to admit that, like, no one's heard this music before. Like, you all were the first people in America to hear this music and tonight. And so, you know, to ask people to, and this opera has not yet been recorded. We're actually recording it in Chicago, which is amazing. But it's really hard to, just because of the scale, it's really hard to get new opera recorded. And so, you know, can we ask people to pay $150 to come to hear something that they've never heard before? Like, that's a tall order. That's a lot to ask, and especially for a new opera that's a new story. I think that will be very exciting to some people. I'm very excited about new work, obviously, but like that's a lot to ask. So I think that this pricing tool for this piece in particular lets people just try it, you know, and you can just see if you like it, but it's not as much of a sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
We also have to be creating work that people want to see, right? And that is fun. I hate to, like, it's a three-letter word that is really, really important, but I don't, like, how are we inspiring people to come and buy those tickets if the work just feels like the same old, same old? And so I think that through pieces like this, I'm hoping that people will come and they will see that opera can communicate in a whole new way.
I think yes, and yes. You know, it's amazing because there's so much new work happening in the world in general, whether it's straight theater, musical theater, opera, symphony, chamber music, et cetera. There's so much new music happening. And when we talk about opera and new works, you know, Opera Company Philadelphia is one of the leading companies, I think, that champions and develops new works. And Lyric has a commitment to new works and American stories told by diverse storytellers. And, you know, so when you have those types of pieces, like The Listeners, and we were here, Lyric was here a couple of years ago with Factotum, and we're working on a new development with Chicago's first poet laureate, Avery R. Young, a piece called Sophronia, which is a biographical story of his family's journey from the Deep South during the Great Migration to the North. So when you have these stories that, again, relate to a human lived experience that is very relatable, that is not far removed from 400, 500 years of an art form, which I love. I'm a singer, I love it. But when we can really tap into these characters in a conventional way, non-conventional way, a way we thought, a way we walked in and was like, no, but then walked out and thought, oh, I'm every one of these people, then that is what makes opera, in my opinion, accessible. it is what then lowers or removes the barrier to the art form that has been so inaccessible for so many for 400 plus years. And then you have the tremendous risk and chance that your general director and president took by giving tickets to the community for $11. I mean, you can barely get to the grocery store and buy a gallon of milk, a carton of eggs, and some bread for $11, but now you also get to come and have an immersive musical experience. Like that, we can't go to the movies for $11. I don't go to Beyonce for $11, okay? So that is the point in which we're like, yes, get people there, get them in the door by any means necessary, whether it's $11 tickets. We do student dress rehearsals where we invite students from across Chicagoland to come and see our dress rehearsal for free. Which is tremendous for students who've never been to the opera, so they get to experience it themselves. So that's the entry point. And then you up the ante to the general community with $11 tickets, and then we just have nowhere to go but up from there. And if we can keep that momentum and keep that energy, I don't believe that opera is a dying art form, so I don't give energy to that. But if we keep this momentum and this energy of these new pieces that are telling relevant stories that allow us to come into the theater at an accessible price point, then I think that we have more than a chance to continue the journey of this art form that brings us all here and that brings all of you here as well.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank you. My name is Oprah.
We're going to leave you with an excerpt, a video excerpt from the premiere production in Oslo. I'm going to call it Claire's mini aria. Like, what do we want to? How do we want to contextualize this and set it up for everybody?
So this is her confessional.
Yes.
So this is along the lines of what Angela did when she confessed to the camera. This is Claire, sort of near the end of the time of the cult, and she is being pulled into a confessional with Howard, and she is revealing that idea of untapped potential and what her life could have been.
To be chosen, to be seen. My daughter tells me I'm selfish. My whole life I've been selfless. Selfless and practical, the definition of a teacher. And the practicalities of being a wife, a mother. Pay the bills, buy the groceries, drive her to tap and jazz, a piano lessons, and swimming, and soccer, and the in another lifetime, I would have made a great novelist, sitting by myself with my imagination, or an architect, designer of impractical houses, a president
And with that, we'll leave you and maybe see you upstairs for further conversation. Thank you to my colleagues, Missy, Royce, Lileana, and Afton. Please help me welcome the singers and pianist Grant Loehnig back on stage. Thank you.